guys, and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video we're going to be talking about my favorite MAC liquid foundations. I'm going to kind of go over each of the different formulas with you guys and show you guys my favorite way to apply them and how I think they apply the best. Alright guys, so we're going to go over 4 foundations. We're going to go over Studio Fix, Waterweight, Studio Sculpt, and the Longwear Waterproof Foundation. So if you guys are interested in seeing how each of these different formulas work, keep on watching. I'll do little timestamps down below in the About section, so that way if you're interested in a specific formula, you can just click on that timestamp and it will take you right to me talking about it and the demo of how to apply it. Alright, before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up down below, and let's get started. Okay, so the first foundation I'm going to start with is Studio Sculpt. I love this foundation, however, I feel like it is easily used incorrectly and therefore a lot of people don't wind up liking it. It is like very rich and moussey in texture. Put a little on my hand so you guys can see. It is a very thick foundation. So the key with this is just the correct technique. And I feel like it works best when you don't layer too many products underneath it, including like moisturizers, anything really hydrating, and lots of primers. So usually what I do if I wear this foundation is I won't moisturize, at least right beforehand. If you moisturize like half an hour to an hour before, you will be fine. But this foundation is really for dehydrated skin. It is super moisturizing, so you honestly don't need to layer a moisturizer underneath it unless you are extremely dry. So here's just a little info from the MAC website. It says it has micronized silicone coated pigments which improve skin adherence and blendability while helping to maintain color purity. So what that means is it's not really going to oxidize on your skin and it's really going to stick and blend out nice and smoothly. It is SPF 15 in it, and it is comfortable on all skin types, but it is mainly suited for normal to dry skin and mature skin because of how hydrating it is. It is water resistant, and yeah, let's get to it. So my favorite way to apply it is just with a ton of Fix Plus underneath. Just really coat my skin in Fix Plus or a really nice hydrating spray. And then I'll put a little bit on the back of my hand. And I feel like it works best to apply this foundation with a flat foundation brush or a sponge. You kind of want something that's really going to push it into the skin. And it is pretty full coverage, so you really only need a small amount. Kind of just pick up a little bit on my brush at a time. And like I said, I feel like it works best almost in pushing motions. And I like to work in either downward or upward strokes or cross motions. And normally I love buffer brushes for foundations, but with this one, I feel like it doesn't work very well with a buffer brush, surprisingly. Definitely works best with something flat and dense to just really blend it in. I think because it's so moussey that, like I just said, it needs that almost pushing in motion versus a circular buffing motion. We'll just kind of move it around and leave it streaky. And the tube is huge, so it'll last you a long time. I'm honestly not sure why it comes in such a large tube and with so much product, because you don't need that much to get a lot of coverage, but I dig it. A giant pimple right here that I picked at, and now it's red. So I will either set this with my Mineralize Skin Finish in the shade Light, or my Studio Fix Perfecting Powder in the shade Extra Light. I just like something nice and lightweight to lightly set the foundation. I don't like to go in with a powder that's too heavy, as this is pretty rich in texture as it is, and it has really great coverage, so you really don't need anything to add any more coverage on top. I would just set it with a powder just so it helps it to stay on a little bit longer and take away some of that shine. And it is a very wet foundation, so if you don't like that kind of tacky feel, or your skin feeling kind of like dewy, you probably won't like this foundation. So I'm just going to go in with a little bit of my Studio Fix Perfecting Powder. This is my 137 brush. I love this brush for really lightweight application of powders. And I'm not going to be applying concealer in this video because I'm trying out a ton of different foundations right in a row for you guys. So there's really no point, but my favorite concealer is the Tarte Shape Tape. It is as good as the hype. And that is my routine with the Studio Sculpt. Alright guys, so another one of my favorite foundations from MAC is the Studio Waterweight. This was actually my first MAC foundation. I love this one. It is super lightweight, really glowy. Whenever I wear this, I always get so many compliments on my skin and people asking me what I'm using. I would definitely recommend this more for dry skin. It is recommended for all skin types. However, I feel like if you are oily, you may not love it because it is very glowy, very shiny. But on the website it says it is long wearing, it provides instant and long-term hydration. It says it controls oil, but still it's not my recommendation for somebody who is more on the oily side. It does have SPF 30 and yes, this is sheer to medium coverage. It's not going to be your most lightweight foundation, but it definitely is pretty sheer. You're not going to get a ton of coverage out of it. And I always just like to really shake it up, get all the contents mixed together. And then I use this with the Tarte Contoured Angled Brush. MAC does sell an angled brush that is pretty much this exact same thing, just a little bit like shorter. But they do sell a brush that looks like this that is formulated to go with the Studio Waterweight. I just haven't purchased this because I had this one previously, and it's pretty much the same thing. Alright, so I just take this and then I kind of just drop it right on my brush. I kind of swirl it onto my brush like that. And with this foundation, I'll just moisturize with my regular moisturizer and then go in with a little Fix Plus. Just a couple sprays. That's my mini coconut version from the Work It Out collection. And then I just start to apply this in long strokes, just getting it all over. And then I'll kind of buff it into circular motions after that. And I think the key with many foundations is just using the right tool to apply it. I think that's extremely important. especially if you want a lot of different foundations and a lot of different like finishes and coverage. You definitely need more than one foundation brush because not each foundation is going to act the same. They're all different consistencies, different formulas. So in order to look good, they need to be applied correctly. And I wish they would come out with one shade lighter in this foundation because I am so pale. And I feel like this does oxidize a little bit on my skin. And I am the shade NC15. It's the lightest shade it comes in at the moment. I would love for them to come out with an NC10 because that is pretty much my true color. But as of right now, they only have an NC10 in these Studio Fix. But I tend to just balance a lot of my foundations out with a really light concealer. I do a lot of highlighting with that. So if my neck and face are a little bit off for this video, don't mind that. Okay, so after I apply the Studio Waterweight, a lot of the times I won't set it with a powder. I am kind of just getting into like setting powders and all that jazz. A lot of the times I don't use powder on my face because I like a lot of glow, and I'm more on the dry side, so I don't tend to use lots of face powders. But if I do want to add more coverage to the water weight, you could either set it with a Studio Fix powder, but that will take a lot of that like glow away, or you could use something like the mineralized powder. And if I were to set this foundation, I would just again use my 137 brush, something really lightweight and fluffy, so that way it still keeps kind of the lightweight feel that this liquid foundation has. Alright guys, so another one of my favorite foundations is the another one of my favorite foundations is the MAC Pro Longwear Waterproof. I love this foundation. It makes your skin look so smooth and flawless, very, very long lasting on the skin. It tends to have a satin matte finish, and even though it is very full coverage, I feel like it still looks pretty natural for a full coverage foundation. So it says it is water resistant, transfer resistant, it is long wearing, tested up to 24 hours, and it provides instant and long-term hydration. I'm not sure if I would say that I feel like it provides that much hydration. I actually add in an oil to it to give it a little bit more hydration and slip, but we'll talk about that in a minute. It says it is non-acnegenic. That is awesome, and it is oil-free. It says neither rain nor tears can budge this oil-free, watertight product that actually repels moisture from the surface of the skin. The formula blends seamlessly on the skin with medium to full weightless coverage. I would definitely say that too. A lot of people, whenever I put this on them, will say it doesn't even feel like they're wearing anything. I wouldn't say that's true with everybody, but I definitely have a lot of customers that will say even though it has tons of coverage, it still doesn't feel like anything, and I agree. Okay, so the way that I like to do this is I will do a few drops of an oil either underneath the foundation, or I'll mix it in with the foundation. So I'm actually going to mix it in. Just going to do a little dot on my hand, and you really only need a small amount of this foundation. You don't want to use too much because one, you'll go through it very quickly, and two, you don't need to. So just pump out or squirt out a little bit. You really don't need a lot. And then I'll just do like a couple drops of oil in there. And I am in the shade NC15, and then I'll take a 170 brush, just kind of pick that up, and then I'll start by like dotting it onto my face and then blending it out from there. And I like to blend this one out in circular motions, and I just layer my normal moisturizer underneath of it. And I definitely think it is buildable. You can add kind of like a little bit more on the areas where you need it, and it'll definitely build up coverage. And if you're ever trying to build up coverage on like a blemish or anything, you always kind of want to stipple it, because that'll help to place the product but not move it around too much while still helping to blend it out. And the reason I like to add an oil into this foundation is because it'll give it a little bit more of a glow, a little bit more hydration, because I find that it isn't too hydrating, even though I know it claims to be. I do feel like it will dry out certain areas of my skin that are more prone to drying out, like the center of my forehead, between my brows. But if I mix in an oil with it, I find that it doesn't dry me out. It gives the foundation a little bit more slip, so I wind up using less because I'm able to blend it out a little bit like further across my face, because this foundation does dry pretty quickly. And I find that even though I mix an oil in with it, it still stays very long lasting. Just don't apply too much of an oil, just 1 to 2 drops should be fine. And it does dry down pretty quickly, so I don't feel like you necessarily need a powder to set it. If you like doing that, you could use something lightweight like the MAC Mineralized Skin Finish, or their Next to Nothing powder would be great on top of this. I think the waterproof might be my favorite foundation from MAC. I always just love the look of my skin whenever I wear it. I feel like it just looks so perfect and flawless, and it's very smoothing on the skin as well. Alright guys, so I feel like the most famous foundation from MAC is the Studio Fix. This is a great foundation. You can really kind of manipulate it in any way you want to, and I feel like it'll still look good on the skin. You can leave it very matte and it looks great. You can add in an oil or a liquid highlighter into it and it still holds up and looks beautiful. This is definitely a medium to full coverage foundation. I feel like it's very buildable, like you can let it dry down and then go over with a little bit more to add more coverage. This is the most popular foundation that I find with MAC. I constantly have people coming to the counter and asking me to match them in this foundation. Alright, on the website it says it applies, builds, and blends easily and evenly. It is comfortable and long wearing. It helps to minimize the appearance of pores and imperfections, giving skin a smoother, flawless look. I definitely agree with that. I feel like this gives you doll-like skin, very porcelain, even looking skin, very smooth. It really helps to hide any texture on the skin. And it says it is good for all skin types, which I totally agree with. My suggestion with this is just to pay attention to the type of skin that you have and prep it correctly. Because like I said, you can kind of do anything with this foundation and manipulate it for your skin type and it'll still look good. And for me, because I am more on the dry side, I do get a little bit more oily in summer, but definitely for the most part I am more dry. I tend to try to give this foundation a little bit more of a glow by adding in an oil or something like my strobe cream, or layering a lot of Fix Plus underneath this. So what I'm going to do is layer a little bit of my strobe cream underneath it, and I use the shade Silver Light in the strobe cream. This will give the skin a lot of hydration, just a really beautiful glow. Has a very clean scent to it too. I like the smell a lot. Kind of smells like just like a plain old-fashioned bar soap. So you can buy a pump for this foundation. I don't have one. I just will dip like a Q-tip or the end of a brush in there, and then I'll dot it onto my skin. I tend to like to dip a Q-tip in there so that way I can get like a nice clean dip every time. And then sometimes I will mist Fix Plus in there. Helps to give it a little bit of slip. And then I typically use this with a buffer brush and move it in circular motions. However, you can totally use a sponge with this foundation and it'll go on just as beautifully. Like I said, you can kind of do whatever you want to this foundation and it'll still look good. It's very manipulatable. Is that a word? So you can kind of do like lots of different cocktails with this and use lots of different brushes or tools with this foundation, and it's almost guaranteed to look good. Or you can pour some onto the back of your hand while your bottle is still new. It gets a little bit more difficult as you get down to the bottom to do that. Just building up a little bit more coverage. So you can see how you can just kind of layer more on top and it'll build very well. Now, I don't really like to build up my foundation all over my face. I feel like it's been very popular lately to just kind of give your face a mask and go in with too much product, when a lot of people really don't need to go in with layer upon layer of foundation and powder and concealer. I think people tend to think their skin is a lot worse than it actually is, and you wind up wasting a lot of product that way. I always like to say to just start with a small amount and add more as you need it, because you can always add more foundation, add more concealer, add more eyeshadow color. You know, it's always easier to start with less and build to more than it is to go in with too much and then be like, oh shit, what do I do from here? And again, this foundation, just set it with something really lightweight. If you want to add more coverage, you can set it with the Studio Fix powder. A lot of people ask me to do this. I normally don't recommend it just because the liquid is already so full coverage, and Studio Fix powder is a powder foundation on its own. However, if you go in with something like really lightweight, like the 137 or the 135, and just lightly dust this on top of the skin, you can get a nice, beautiful, full coverage appearance. But typically I wouldn't set this with a powder, or I would go in again with the mineralized skin finish, next to nothing powder, or even a translucent powder. So I'm just going to set this with a little bit of my mineralized skin finish and the 137 brush. You don't always need to set all over either. You can always just set the areas that you want to be a little bit more mattified, like under the cheekbones, top of the forehead, sides of the nose. And after I finish my makeup, I always go in with Fix Plus. However, use whatever finishing spray you like to use, but I would recommend using some sort of finishing spray, whether it is something hydrating like Fix Plus or something that'll kind of lock and load your makeup for the day, like the Urban Decay All Nighter or the Makeup Forever, like Mist and Fix, is it called? Something like that. Maybe that's another brand. Either way, I always like to use a face spray after I finish all of my makeup. I feel like it helps to kind of re-soften everything, give it a more skin-like texture, and just really mesh everything together.